Hello everyone, I'm Leifkicker.
And I'm the Bean.
If you're watching this video, you probably bought a DIY settler's board and you would like to know how that was painted.
So stay tuned and we'll show you how to paint this up.
Your DIY settler's board is going to come to you already looking fabulous like this.
Your DIY set is going to come with 11 water border pieces, 6 wood, 6 wheat, 6 sheep, 5 rock, 5 brick, 2 desert, and 11 water harbor border pieces, along with 30 bases to attach your resource pieces to.
We will pack your set safely in a cardboard box with many layers of foam and flat cardboard sheets to protect your tiles. And you can reuse this box after you have completed painting your set as a storage solution.
When you're ready to get started painting, you're going to need, of course, paint brushes, nail file, X-Acto knife, a clear coat, some super glue, and of course, paper towels because messes.
Before you're ready to paint everything, you're going to go over each piece and make sure that they fit nicely in their bases. This should already be done for you. That's our goal, to ship you something that is ready to go. And this should fit pretty snug. But if not, you're going to need some type of nail file like so, and you can go over each piece until you can get it to fit snugly in the base. You can also use the same nail file to clean up the edges if you want to smooth the edges anymore. And you might need to clean up the base of each dock so that fits nicely into the harbor spot. You'll use your X-Acto knife or just a tool like a pin or a pick or something, because sometimes, see right there, that little blue speck right there is a piece of the silicone that we just missed. We'll normally try to pop that out for you, but in case we miss it, you're going to want to pop those out. And that's just because it's not going to want to hold paint very well. It'll just make your finished piece all the more better. When you have all that done, rinse and wash all your pieces off so there's no dust, and you'll be ready to start painting. For brushes, I like to use something like these when I'm adding a dry brush, which we'll go over as we're painting, and something like this brush whenever we're trying to coat our first layers, which we'll go over here as well. And a little set of brushes like this is pretty handy when you're trying to cut in the details. You want something with a nice chisel tip on the end and something with a point. You can find brushes like this at Amazon, your local hobby store, just about anywhere. It shouldn't be more than $5, $6 a pack. You're not going to need your bases, so you can go ahead and set those aside. And the Being and I are going to show you how to paint each one of these tiles. We are just going to paint one of each version, but you'll want to paint all of them as you go along. And to give you an idea of the timeline that might take, it usually takes me about 25 hours to paint a full 6-player set from beginning to end.
All right, well then let's get painting.
Well, to start, we do have these all washed and cleaned, so they're ready to accept some paint. And the resin normally takes really well. You don't need a primer. That's mostly just because it has a pretty porous surface, so the first layer of paint is going to act like a primer. I've had pretty good success with it so far, especially with a number of clear coats that I go through. But you could start with primering each one of these colors if you wanted, with a close enough color to match the base color. So Being, you are going to start with some true blue, and you'll paint your water tops. And I'm going to go through and paint everything that takes a dark brown, and we'll be using this dark chocolate, and that's going to be the desert, the wheat, and all of the docks. I like to use a brush that's going to hold the paint pretty well. This fluffy brush here will do great, so that I can really get the paint saturated onto the first layer. You are wanting to give everything a nice even coat. You don't want the paint to pool up and erode any of the details that are in the tile. That can happen, so make sure you get everything nice and smoothed out really well. There's little rocks in the middle that I like to paint gray, so I'm not too worried about painting over those. For the wheat, we're really just working on the edges here and on the ground where the dirt would be. And there's little bushes that we have on the corners. Those will get painted green later, so you don't have to worry too much about getting those painted brown. So here's kind of what you're going for on your first layer. We'll let these dry before we add any more layers. When the being is done painting those blue waters, she's going to paint all these docks brown. I'm going to go ahead and move on to these other colors. And as you paint your set, you'll paint like you might paint all 6 wheat that you have and set that aside and then move on to the next brown and set that aside. So the idea as you're rotating around all your pieces, by the time you come back to your first piece, it'll be nice and dry and ready for the next step. For the brick tile, we're going to start with a deep burgundy. It just needs to be a dark maroon. I like to start with something like that. And the same thing as we've been doing for all the base coats, we're just wanting to get the resin tile nice and saturated with the new color and give us something to dry brush to on the next steps. You don't have to match our colors exactly at all. You can go your own direction here. This is just to give you an idea of what you might want to paint like. And my rule of thumb is to try to do 3 shades on each color. So for example, this brick tile, we're going to go from a dark maroon to a medium light maroon to a light maroon, and we might top it off with some other highlight colors, and we'll do that for each version of the tiles. When you're doing the dock, we're just trying to get these cross planks underneath here. We don't really need to worry too much about getting these numbers covered with the brown paint, nor do we need to worry about whatever the ore resource is on top. I would stay away from painting this little part here that fits into the space for your harbors. And I just like to take that first dark brown and just try to make a nice smooth coat over all the surface there. So my first go over would be something like this. Didn't worry too much about this stuff because it's going to be painted later and everything has a nice saturated look. Do the mountain area next, and we'll just start with whatever the dark gray color is. In this case, it's Gray Storm. Here we go for our mountains. We're just worrying about the top half here. We're going to come back later and paint this bottom half a green color. Got a little piece, that's a little piece of resin or silicone. We should have popped that out because that's not going to paint over. So let's pop that out.
Nice.
There we go. Perfect. Moving on to the trees, we're going to go with the darkest color of green that we had, and this is going to be leaf green in this case. We have some tree trunks along the sides here that we don't need to worry too much about getting green on because we're going to come back and paint those brown. But I do like to coat the base in the green and the crown of the trees in green. For these little pasture tiles, I like to do some type of green like so. This is a Hauser light green. As you're painting, you're going to have 5 sheep on here. Just try not to get a lot of paint on them. There's a rock right here. You don't have to worry too much about painting that. We'll come back later. These trees right here are going to get painted later as well. So if you get paint on it, that's okay. And there's another rock right here. The biggest thing to avoid is probably the sheep. We are going to paint them white later, but the less that you have to try to cover up everything, the better. Saves you time. To get a little more detail around these sheep, rather than trying to jam this big fat boy in there, we're just going to switch over to something smaller.
That makes sense. All right.
So that's going to be good enough for the grass on this one. I am going to go ahead and, even while this pasture is wet, go ahead and paint these trees here a dark green, like an olive green or something. I like to use this plantation pine, look something like that, because this is a pine tree. And something like that will be good enough for now. So everything has its first coat of something on it. And at this point, I'd start back over where I started. In this case, it would be the brown stuff, so we'd go to the next color. We're going to have to wait for these to dry a little bit. If you're painting your whole set at once, by the time you get back to this color, it's probably most definitely going to be ready to start doing the dry brush steps. You want to be sure to go back through your brushes. You don't want to leave them sitting in the water for too long, because they'll lay there and they'll curl the ends of the brush. So give all those a good rinse before you let everything sit to dry. Our first layer is nice and dry, and it's time to start bringing the different shades of colors up through all the different various colors that we have. So we're going to start doing a bit of a dry brush on all of the tiles. And when it comes to dry brushing, we'll use the blue here, this water, for an example. You're not saturating the whole tile like we did initially. You're just going to load up some of that paint onto the brush and wipe some of that paint back off. You know, you don't want all that paint on there. You just want it to be dry. I guess that's why they call it a dry brush. And then you just want to hit the top of the tile. And it starts to bring out that lighter color. So for the second layer of color, it's a little heavier than the last layer, but not as heavy as the first layer. So we just kind of saturate all the areas of the tile with the next color, load up our paintbrush as we need. Just keep bringing up that second layer of color just a little bit at a time. We don't want to go too far into that second color, so we're repainting the whole tile. We want to leave some of that first layer behind, so we have two tones. And then we'll come back later with a third tone. I like to do 3 tones on all the colors if I can. If you can go to 5 layers, 6 layers. The more layers of color you add, the sharper and better it's going to look. But you can really get away with a lot with just 3 layers. So something like that is what we're going for. I'm going to go through all the browns here. Here you go, Bing.
Thanks.
And we're going to go with the next layer of light brown. This is just espresso for us. Could be anything for you. And we'll cover the wheats, the desert, and the docks with a nice light brown. I also like to use a fluffy brush when I'm doing the dry brushing. It helps feather out that color really well. While the bean goes over everything and finishes up that light brown, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next colors. And for the brick tile, we're just going to hit it with the next shade of maroon. In this case, it's going to be a heritage brick. Same technique, just a light brushing. All right, I think that's good enough. We're going to move through the next 3 colors here. For the mountains, I'm going to hit the top with some zinc. For the trees, we're going to hit the top of the trees, the crown of the trees, with a holly green. And let's do a little bit of the citron green or celery green for the base of the trees around the grass. This will help blend it to the pastures. And for the pastures, we will also do the celery green, just a light dry brush. So we're starting with a darker green on the trees and a lighter green on these pastures, the sheep tiles. So it will, it's going to look a little bit different. You'll see it in the end. It's going to help to make sure that your bristles on your brush are nice and dry in between rinsing. You want them, any moisture is going to change the way the dry brush goes to be more of a faded, kind of a bleached out look. And that's not what we're going for. Not too concerned about accuracy right here. We just want a couple different colors of shades of color. I'm going to do the celery green first. That's good enough for the sheep. I'm going to do similar to the trees here. I don't go quite as heavy when I'm doing the trees, just so that we're not blending the colors too close, because we do want the tiles to look different. With the grass done around the trees, we're going to do the crowns. Something like this is good enough for now. Now it's time to add a third layer of color to each shade. So we're going to go through and add a lighter layer of brown. In this case, we'll go with the khaki tan, and we're going to do that on the bases of the wheat, the desert, and all of the docks. I would use this brush since it's already brown.
Yeah, that's what I was planning on doing.
Yep. While she is doing all those, I am going to go through and paint all the trunks of the trees a brown. And we're going to go back to that dark chocolate and try to carefully try not to get any on the grass of the base here or of the crown of the tree.
Oh my gosh. What happened?
It just gelled up.
What do you want to do with that?
I don't want it. Get rid of it.
Okay.
Trash?
Yeah. I'm gonna stick it like right here for right now. It's way messy.
Do you remember what the last video time was?
Nope. Just be straight up with you.
I thought it was like 20 minutes as well.
Oh, yeah. The last long one was, 20 minutes. But you meant like, oh, wait, we haven't stopped this one.
Too bad you're not painting on camera.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, isn't it?
Because they're watching both of us at the same time.
Because everyone's super interested in the media person who doesn't know how to paint.
Yeah, I think they are. Honestly. Nobody's Facebook stalking me.
Yeah. Nice. This one looks good. Am I on camera? I also just can't see because your arms are right in the way.
Sorry for having arms.
I mean, I have arms too, and they're not in your way. Just say.
It's going to be good enough for now for the trees. We're going to be adding another layer of color on there, probably after we do the ink wash.
Here's the harbors. Aren't I doing those?
I just wanted a little bit more. We're going over these wheat and just darkening up those edges just a little bit. where are we at? Very good. So,
I need to do this, right?
yep.
Got quite a bit on the brush.
Are you doing the khaki tan?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
We're going to go through and do another layer of colors now that all this has had its kind of a second layer added to it. For the water, we are going to hit the tops just lightly with a little bit of this light blue or Blue Haven. For the sheep, we're going to add just to the grass some citron green. For the brick, we're going to add some terra coral. This is just a light dry brush. Around the edge of the wheats here, we're going to be adding this golden straw to give the wheat a more straw look. And we're going to do a slate gray on the mountains, and a bleach sand is going to lightly be added to the deserts and over the tops of the docks. And now we can just do all this and fast forward through it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I put it there.
Me neither. Wow. Look at that. That's horrible. This is like putty. What the heck? Okay. Or, yeah.
Do you need us back?
No, I mean I will whenever I start the other brown type stuff, right? Just like that.
Oh shit. Oops. More. So we're gonna cut all this out, but you're not painting with the top of the brush.
Yeah, pushing the side.
You're painting with the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess you don't see yourself painting. You're just going whoop, swoop, 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 swoop.
Okay.
So when you're doing this coat, you're gonna load your brush up, then make sure it's nice and dry.
Okay.
So it looks like little white caps on the water. Like so.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good that you're in the camera a little bit.
I think someone's not taking all the room this time. All right, better?
Yeah,
Okay.
good enough.
I always love to hear it. Always love to hear it. Alright. Where did my brown brush go? Did you put it back in the water?
Yep, it's right there.
And doing this one to the arbors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
A little heavier.
Okay, better.
Like that. After we added that terra coral to these brick, I like to go back and use the same color that we did on the wheat. In this case is the golden straw. And even with the terra coral still on my brush, go ahead and blend that with a little bit of the golden straw. And we'll use that as another highlight on the end of this.
You weren't good enough? Did you already get that one?
I did.
You did?
So we're going to pause it here just so we can... We were nearing the end of round 2 and blocking in all our colors. We're going to have to go through each piece that has grass on it. The wheat have little bushes at the end of each corner. The brick have little bushes on the end of each corner. And the mountains here have a whole lot of grass around the bottom. And if you look closely at your water tiles, there's a little bushes here kind of dotted around along with little rocks in between. You'll have a couple of different styles, but I think once you start painting it a little bit, you'll kind of get an idea of what we're doing. So the being is going to go through and she's going to start blocking in all these green colors for us. And we are going to use the same green that we did for the first layer, which was leaf green. While she is doing that, I'm going to take these docks and we're going to start painting the bricks that are on the dock, the rocks, these little logs, and the wheat. And we're going to paint it the same way that we would have painted the bricks or the rocks or the wheat that she has, just to match it up. So When I paint the rocks on the 2-to-1 harbor, I like to go through at this time and paint all the rocks that are hiding in all the various little places. For the desert, we have 3 rocks here. For the sheep, we have a rock that's right here and a rock hiding under this tree here. And if you look closely on all the harbors, like I mentioned before, there's a couple different rocks on each border, including the borders that don't have a harbor. There's a little rock on each one. So you want to go through at the same time. That way you're saving your steps and doing that all at once. A different color brown so that it doesn't get kind of lost in the dirt because it's not a dirt color. And in this case, I like to do a honey brown. While I'm painting that brown, I also like to paint this little raised area, this beachy area on the edge of your border, that same honey brown to give it something different. We're going to keep this transition here the same color that matches the border. So you can do this however color you like. We'll go over that later. But for the beach area, we're going to do the same honey brown. 11 minutes in. I'm going to go over the trees one more time with that plantation pine and kind of clean up where we might have got a little over dry brushing on. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go back over the brick from the dock to kind of make it look like the same steps that we did here. So we're going to hit it with a lighter heritage brick. We're going to hit it with a little bit of terra coral, and we'll blend that a little bit with a golden straw to kind of make this look like a real brick. And over each rock face that we painted, so like on this harbor in these deserts, we're going to go back over with the lighter zinc and the lightest of the gray that was slate gray. So we're going to go with the second level of gray and the lightest level of gray. And we'll do the same thing on each rock that's hiding on the borders. So while this green is drying, the being is going to go over each number with the whitewash. And we're just going to hit the top of the numbers to give it a nice bright white look. And we'll do that on all your docks. Right now, the trees are good enough to go, and the deserts are good enough to go. I'm going to paint the top of this a bright orange using cadmium orange. And we're also going to do the tops that are the tops of the wheat. So there'll be one here, and then there'll be these two here, the same orange. Something like that is good enough for now. We're going to come back with a yellow and dry brush over that here in just a minute. While this is drying, I'm going to go over all the green areas that we just painted again. So the edges of the wheat and the brick and the mountains here, along with the grass that we painted around the edges. And we're going to hit that with a little bit of citron green. This weed is still drying, so while that takes a second to get to where it needs to be, you can spend that time and go around and paint each one of your sheep, including the ones on your dock. And I like to start with a bleach sand. And we're just going to go through and try to clean up where you might have overpainted with a little bit of green or whatnot, and give those sheep a nice, fresh, clean looking coat. We are nearing the end of round 2 here, adding on some highlights. And the last little bit that you're going to want to do is to paint a nice little stripe around those wheat bundles like the being has been doing. She chose a little brown rope, which I think is quite appropriate. And we're going to highlight the tops of the wheat because it's amber waves of green, I think it is called. So we want it to look like wheat. So we'll paint the tops that we painted orange with a little dry brushing of this cadmium yellow, and same with the tops of the wheat. I like to use a big flat brush when I'm doing something like that.
Oh,
yep, and you'll do those. And you want to leave some of that orange behind. You're not trying to cover up the whole thing. Bring it out as yellow as you like. So at the end of your long journey, hopefully you've come up with something similar to this. This is just kind of a blocked in color. We're going to give this a generous clear coat, give that clear coat time to dry, and do one more clear coat after that. And then from there, we're going to go to round 3, which is the ink wash. Everything has been clear coated. I went with 2 clear coats, and this has been drying for a couple of days now. This is kind of what we're going to be working with. Before we start the inking process, I thought I would show you kind of what the transitions are going to look like. So this bottom row over here has been inked, and we went back through the highlights, and this would be what I would call done for the painting part. And this top row we have not inked yet, but we're going to show you just what that is here in just a second. And this is the other set of tiles. So again, bottom row not inked, or bottom row inked, top row not inked. So this is what it's going to start with. You can see that the painting is not perfect right now. It doesn't need to be. But when we're done, we're aiming for something like this. So these mountains, they already have a little, you can see a little bit of green kind of on the mountains. That doesn't need to be there, and that's okay. We just wanted to block in the color at this stage. We'll ink it, and we'll do the highlights again, and it'll cover it right up, and it'll look good like this. So I did not have these glued down yet. You'll do the ink washing on all these first before you glue it to the base. And when I talk about ink washing, it's just some black paint. We'll use this bigger bottle here, but you'll have enough in your little one. And probably about 3/4 of that should be water. You want it to be a consistency that it's going to get up in all those cracks and crevices of the piece. I'm so slow talking. But not be so saturated in color that it's repainting the piece. It needs to be liquidy, nice and watery. These are not the correct technical terms. I don't know how to describe it. That's just what I do. When you coat your piece, you'll be able to dab it back off with a paper towel. So while the being finishes up the docks, I'm going to take a wet rag and lightly wipe down the ink wash a little bit more. So everything is inked and the wash is dried. So when we do our dry brush, we're not going to be hitting any wet pools that are going to dilute out our brush and make a mess. We're going to go through each piece and we're going to lightly dry brush the original color that we went with. So like for the wheat, we're going to go through here and do some golden straw. And then for the tops, we're going to add some cadmium yellow. We're going to do the lighter shades of the greens that we picked out on top of our pasture, and all the rocks that are on everything that we have out across the whole set. We'll go through and lightly dry brush some zinc and then a little bit of slate gray on top of that. As we're doing this, we're trying to fix any errors we made. So we were talking earlier about where you might have accidentally got some green paint or something up in the mountains. Now's the time to be careful as you're painting to get those blocked in nicely. If everything goes well and you take your time and have a little patience, this will turn out great. For the trees, you want to start by going over your tree trunks first with a little bit of brown and a light or small brush. And we're just dry brushing. We're not repainting the trees. We're just letting the brush hit the surface. And then we'll come back through and we'll do a little light green on top of the grass. And I'm going to go with festive green to highlight these tree caps with. And you are already going on the water, which is great. We're going to do a little celery green. Highlight these sheep again. The real light dry brush layer. So we went over everything, but the light layer of celery green came up with something like that. We're going to do the same thing to the grass. Even though I said do it first, and I didn't do it first, I guess it's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. We're going to go through these trees with this light honey brown and lightly dry brush, trying not to get that brown on anything else other than the trunks. The little bitty small brush.
So waters, grass, rocks. Do you highlight anything else?
Yep. So you've got the water and the grass and the rocks all done. Now is this little path right here. So if you just take this honey brown that I have out that I'm working on the trees with, and you'll do the same over here on your wood, and just a light dry brush on the path.
Okay, cool.
That's how we're looking on the trees.
What goes over this part?
So for the desert, which you can't see on screen yet, there we go, the desert tile, I like to take some bleach sand and go over all the rocky bits. Now, with the same bleach sand, well, yeah, the grass is done on the sheep. So when the grass is done on the sheep, you lightly dry brush the sheep, bleach sand, and same with the desert area. For the bricks, we're going to do a little bit of the terra coral, just lighter than we already have here, and then we'll go back with a light coat of golden straw over that to give that a nice painted desert look. And we'll also be sure to hit our bricks sitting over there on the dock at the same time. So we went over this little brick tile again with the terra coral and golden straw, and then I hit the corners with a little bit of the citron yellow or citron green here, and I would call that done. So we painted the mountain a few shades lighter with the zinc and the slate gray. We were real careful to get through the sides and clean up any of the green from earlier. And after that, we went over the grass with a little bit of the citron green. While we have citron green going, we're going to go ahead and go over a little bit of the grass on the pastures here. I do like to go over all the pieces that have a little bit of grass poking out on them while I'm doing the citron green and just getting all the tiles at the same time. So you'll go through all 30 of them, hit your harbor or your border pieces too. It's just a light little touch. So that one, you can actually help. You'll do the tops of this, the cadmium yellow, and at the same time, since we've already got the wheat kind of blended in on the sides, you'll do the tops of those too. So this all gets the yellow, and you want to leave some of that orange poke through, so you're not completely covering it.
Okay.
Oops, that's way more than you need. And you'll want a flat brush.
Okay.
While she's doing that, I'm going to fix up these trees, these pines. We're going to just start out with the same color that we painted them originally, the plantation pine, and then our highlight color is going to be celery green. And we're not repainting the thing, saturating it in color. We are just going to dry brush over it. That way the inked in areas give us a bit of contrast. Got everything else highlighted nicely on these sheep. We're going to finally go over and highlight the sheep lightly with a little bit of bleach sand. Being careful not to get it on anything else other than the sheep.
Is there anything else I need to do?
I think I'd call that pasture done. The sheep are nice and textured in with some color. Does color add texture?
Textured in with some color. Maybe some sunlight.
This needs to, I like to go a little whiter. Oh, not that white though. But a little bit. I'm going to do the tops of the trees here. And we're going to hit it with a little bit of holly green and a little bit of festive green. While I'm doing the trees, you can go over all the numbers with some of this whitewash. So
Whitewash.
just the tops.
Okay. And the question mark?
Yes, and the question mark. I think these are all looking nice and ready to go. Now it's time to start adding them to their bases. And everything went well. You've already test fit and made sure it all glues in nicely. But I like to, before I glue it in, I like to make sure that it's going to fit and know how it's going to fit. That way I don't have a half glued piece that I'm fighting with to get locked down on this tile. So of note, these can be various sized by just the slightest of slightest. So this one fits nicely in this one. It's a little bit too snug for this one. So you might have sanded this one down to make sure it fit perfect, and you did for this one. And that's just because, hand making 6 tiles like this, I was not machine precise, but I was only off within a millimeter or less. That's pretty good. Not a machine. So we got one more little bit of thing to do before this is all done, and we're going to come back and ink the borders here, but we can't do that until the glue is dry. So give your glue some time to dry. You could, at this stage, go ahead and clear coat everything. I gave everything a good clear coat, and we are going to go through each border and just a little bit of this ink that we made earlier. And I like to try to get it down in the cracks of the seam that we just glued into around this hex and on the edges. Trying not to get it on the piece at all because we've already did this step there. We take a paper towel and we just wipe it back off. Just gonna do that with the rest of them. I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Wipe these down a little bit with a wet cloth now. I like to do, you wouldn't do your whole set at once. You would do like maybe 6 tiles and then wipe down with the wet cloth, do 6 tiles and wipe down. We got the final stages and nearing the end of this journey. The last thing that I like to do, now that we had everything inked, we have a nice little dark line around the bases here, is we want to blend this border that everything sits on. And I like to use some of the khaki tan, the lighter brown that you had that we did some shading with earlier. And we are just going to carefully go around and just dry brush the borders. I try to just streak it down each side, and you're just a little bit of paint everywhere. Give it some patterns, but you don't want to give it obvious brush strokes. And you'll do this over all the tiles. No need to do the bottom, just the tops here. We are near the knee end here. We're going to take these to the spray room and give them a couple of clear coats, and we'll add them to the board.
Thanks for sticking around to the end. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we cannot wait to see what your board looks like whenever you finish. Be sure to share and tag us in your post or just send it directly to us. We can't wait to see.
Thanks for watching. Did we just nail that motherfucker on the first one? Oh, fuck yeah, fuck yeah.